Well, let me just start. It is common for high achieving leaders to have a strong score on perfection because perfection does drive a lot of results. And its correlation is very low to things in the top half. In other words, it's inverse, but not strongly inverse. So, and that's why it's close to the edge, like because the profile lays things out in the way that they correlate. So close to the border between creative and reactive is perfection. It's in the controlling dimension because it tends to be very driven. And it's also highly featured in the cognitive psych literature. It's a huge driver and it's a huge cause of internal stress because the underlying core assumption is I have to be perfect in every moment at everything, or else. Or else I'm a failure, or else I'm no good, or else I'm worthless. So there's a huge driver here. And that's what drives the results. And you get really good at getting really, really good results and developing your capability and so on in a given profession. But ultimately, it becomes a lot of energetic cost for you and for others around, which we can talk about. So that's just the basic frame. Bill, you want to play into that?
Perfection being perfect in and of itself, when it is working for the individual and or for the teams and the folks that they work with, it really works because it achieves great results. There's no question about it. Once it gets stronger, it goes just the opposite, and it's a diminishing result. So the results go down and the energetic cost goes up. So when you think about results going down and energetic cost going up, you've got literally a double multiple there, a multiple that takes you in the wrong direction. And the internal cost for perfection that Bob talked about for a moment is really high because it's never good enough. And it's never good enough actually then translates to I'm not good enough. There's no way. And it plays itself out in everything. So I throw off a pretty high perfection. It's just that my other reactive tendencies are higher. So, you play that one out, even though it's plenty high. And Cindy, my partner in life, throws off even a higher perfect score and works it all the time. But I had this experience. She and I were co-facilitating a large group conference, 450, 500 people in the room, a series of conferences to redesign the entire manufacturing organization. And it had gone on for weeks and weeks, and it was a cumulative kind of effect, and from one group to another. And we were done, and it had gone incredibly well. And we got this standing ovation. And I mean, the entire room stood up, and it's a standing ovation, and Bob will appreciate having been with me a lot. I was right in the front of the ovation, just soaking it in, like, and I looked over my shoulder, and Cindy was back behind me writing some notes. And I said, Cindy, what the heck? You got, 450 people giving us a standing ovation. She says, yeah, I thought about some things I could have done differently, and I didn't want to miss them. And I went, wow, okay, there it is. I mean, the entire audience is, so appreciative of this work and what we've done together, and was giving us that generosity. And Cindy was right in, yeah, but it wasn't good enough. It wasn't there. I could have done better. And that's perfection is relentless. It is relentless in the way that it is pursued, and the relentlessness, is that how you say it? In and of itself, will not let up. It will not let up.
Yeah.
So that's one that really, really diminishes results, costs high energy, and works against relationships with others, because the same thing transfers from them to them from you.
Yeah. I'm a recovering perfectionist big time. It's one of my stronger scores in the bottom half of the profile. So it's just partly why it ended up on the profile. Um, I'll just tell you where I know it came from. My dad was uh, probably one of the greatest human beings I know. Have ever had the privilege of being around. Love him to death. Um, and he had a temper. So there was an angry streak in him. And he was an engineer. And his way of being in relationship with us was to create really creative work projects. Eventually, we had a full-on steel fabrication shop in the basement with overhead cranes and wire welders and band saws and drill presses, and we were cranking stuff out. Most of which went up to the YMCA camp, and we built these elaborate docks and spiral staircase, two platform diving towers, and all this sort of stuff. I loved it. Uh, and every night, Dad would come home from work and check the work. Out came the level, out came the square, out came the tape measure, and he'd be checking everything against the blueprints. And if it was perfect, and I mean within a 32nd of an inch, where this hole was supposed to be drilled, it was drilled, or this thing was right dead square. If it was perfect, he beamed with pride. And if it wasn't, there was hell to pay. I mean, seriously, like one time he took a sledgehammer to it and just smashed it apart in anger. So I got really quickly, it's either perfect or I'm in trouble. I'm not okay. I don't feel safe, and I certainly don't feel good enough. So I got tied up there. My worth, love of my dad, the admiration or affirmation of my dad is tied to perfect performance every time. And that took me so far in my life. I,
Yeah.
I got really good at that stuff. In fact, at one point, we were building something up at this camp, and we had a whole section yet to build, all custom built steel fabrication. I was a freshman in high school, and he was beside himself because he couldn't finish it. He had to go back to work, and camp was going to open the next week. And I didn't know what to do either. And at one point, I got clear. I got an insight. I went up to him and said, "Dad, I got a solution." What? I said, "I got this. You leave. I can do this." Now, here I'm a freshman in high school, and I'm going to build this whole section of steel fabrication dock, and it'll be done when you get back in a week. And he looked at me. It was a moment between us. He looked at me and he smiled and says, "Yeah, you can do this." And he packed up and left. And he came back a week later, and it was done. So this served me, and I love all that got transmitted in that. And also embedded in there is this core operating assumption that if it ain't perfect, I'm dead. I am not okay.
Well, the perfection side, you can hear it in Bob's story and the way that he was raised. So, for those of us that are perfectionists, or really throw off that perfect score, or those of us that work with or raised by or in family with perfectionists, we understand how this plays out all the time. Because the only thing that the perfectionist is harder on others is on self.
Right.
So it comes back to self almost all the time. Not good enough in the way that we chatted about, but also with what you're hearing coming from Bob is that it also serves us. So when perfection serves us and it brings out the very, very best in us, and the very best that we can actually contribute and get results with, that's one thing. But it's a lack of fulfillment or satisfaction that allows for us to look at that and say, "Wow, that was amazing. I did a really good job. I am, those things." The other side of it is that there's a constructive dissatisfaction. There's a destructive dissatisfaction. Constructive dissatisfaction is when I can see something and I know that it can be improved upon, it can be better, and I'm going to learn from that going forward, but does it keep me from getting things done? Destructive is when there's never anything that is good enough.
Yeah.
And the absence of fulfillment around that, the absence of actually being able to see accomplishment in self and others, then penetrates into that, oh man, I'm not good enough. Bill doesn't think anything that anybody else is ever going to be what it needs to be because the only one that can get it done is him. And it plays itself out. So it detracts from all those other areas of engaging others and being engaged in it myself in a way that we get the kind of fulfillment from the work and effort that we put in. And that's the difference between the constructive and destructive side of it. And it'll toggle over you in a big way. No question. No question. It's, I think, probably more than anything else on the lower half on the dimension scores, on the reactive tendencies. I have to watch that one. When my perfect kicks in, well, it's just not that much fun to be around. It's not generative. It actually goes the opposite direction.
When I first started created my first workshop back in the mid to late 80s, eventually called Mastering Leadership. Interestingly, that's what the book eventually was named. It took me 3 years. I worked on that design for 3 years before I put it out, and I put it out with a group of close-in friends because I was so afraid of it being imperfect and me being seen as irrelevant. And fast forward a couple of years, I got this idea for what became a workshop called Pathways to Partnership. There's a paper on that on our website. From concept to workbooks built, we're in doing the workshop at AT&T with senior leaders 9 months. And the reason was I went to my clients and I said, "Hey, I got this idea for a workshop. Would you be willing to let me experiment with it?" So I failed fast forward. And I had to live with all the discomfort of my perfectionism. And so that's the transition. Does it have me or do I have it? If it has me, it's debilitating. I procrastinate. I work too hard on stuff. I'm not willing to experiment. I'm not willing to let it get a little messy so I can learn. It's not a great learning structure. And two, oh, yeah, it's a mess inside. I feel that fear and that sense of uh, ugh, that comes with it not being perfect. But if I can live with that and fail forward fast, all of a sudden it's getting perfected. And
Yeah,
that's,
you know what, Bob? This is really important. I've experienced you through this process of the work we've been doing, created integral and integral, really to unity and what it is. I've experienced you as getting in and experimenting and learning and then iterating.
yeah,
And that iteration actually continues to tune up and fine tune and create a much better outcome and process in the way that the sessions going forward done. You wouldn't have been able to do that in the same way that you do it now, 10 years ago.
Mm.
So the difference in here is that, hey, you know what? That really turned out well. That was awesome. What an incredible first run at it. And here's what we need to do differently next time, or what we need to add, what we need to take away, what that looks like. That's how we can take that critical eye. That perfection is a critical eye. So understand you get a critical eye on anything that's accomplished through perfection, and that critical eye can serve you to continue to improve, to make things better, to get a better result without the defeating aspects of it, which are the ones that I'm never good enough. Nobody else is either. My dad was major perfectionist. Bob and I have this in common. And born and raised on cattle ranch, agricultural business. We also have agriculture in our background in common. Dad had two things going for him: what to do and how to do it. So my father wasn't okay with just what you needed to do when he was giving us our orders for the day, our direction. He also wanted to step in and tell you how to do it. So his perfection was tuned up as not only there an outcome here, the way you get to that outcome is even better. That took away the initiative and the creativity for all of us that were the hands and the laborers. So it's like, well, wait a minute, do you want us to be involved in this process, or you just want to be able to tell us how this process is not only going to result in X, here's how we're going to get to X. And that was a big learning for that. So there's that aspect of the what and the how, and perfectionists try to guide both as leaders. And then they're limited in their capacity and their capability to actually scale their leadership and get more done. So perfectionism limits a leader in being able to accomplish what needs to be accomplished and get away from that. And it is the enemy, as Collins would say, of good. So when you're working with large groups, if what you're moving towards is perfection, it's as elusive as consensus. You have to get close, and close is good enough to move forward because you can continue to iterate, you can continue better. And as Bob said, sometimes you got to fast fail. Perfectionist, it kills them to fail. Are you kidding me? It's not a failure of it, it's a failure of me. I failed.
Yeah. Like if you take my core belief around perfection, to be is to be flawlessly perfect, flawlessly perfect results, flawless results every time. Now run it backwards. Not to be flawlessly perfect is not to be. That's pretty terrifying to the self-identity. I am these results. I have to be this perfect, or I'm not worthy of existing. At some level, the survive my very survival feels at stake. It's not. That's the core delusion of it, but it feels at stake. And as Bill talked about, when it internally it's very punishing, externally it can be very punishing. So when I was early on doing these workshops, I put a team of people around me that wanted to learn to facilitate them. And it wasn't going very well, but at one point I brought in Clay Lafferty, who developed the human synergistics assessment, to work with us as a group to really understand some of these concepts, because I learned a lot from him. And what the group didn't know was that 10 years earlier, and when I worked internally, I'd brought his wife in to do some work with the organization. And I was radical perfectionist, and in an earlier stage of development, which is it's all about being competent. And I ran her out. She was actually very good now that I look back on it, but she didn't meet my perfectionistic standings. And like you said, there's a way to do it right. And I knew the way to do it right. And she wasn't doing it the way that I knew it should be done right. And so I ran her out. And so 10 years later, I bring Clay back in, and we had a great session, and we decided it went so well, we'd do another session. So a month later, he came back, and we're all sitting around the living room. And then we start in, and Clay stops me and he says, Bob, can I give you some feedback?
You always say no when that happens. Just no,
Yeah,
no.
right. Yeah, you don't, yes is the wrong response. I said, sure. He said, are you sure right here in front of your peers? I said, sure. He said, well, I went back after our last session and I talked to my wife. Well, I knew exactly where he was going with this. And he said, and we combed our database for Bob Andersons that live in Toledo, and we couldn't find another one. So we have to assume you are the same Bob Anderson we worked with 10 years ago. Is that true? I said, yeah, that's true. He goes, you still want the feedback? And I said, yeah. He said, you're not the same asshole you used to be. And the whole group nodded like, yeah, that's for sure. And I was like, okay, everybody agrees I've been an asshole. And then Clay said, whatever you're doing is working. Keep doing it.
Mhm.
And I went click, click, click. I know what I'm doing. Two things. I had a practice. Every time I felt that inner pressure, that fear, that doubt, I tracked it. I tracked it down. I went through the self talk, all the messages, the voice of fear, right down to I'm worthless or else. And I started in that, it started to loosen its grip. I saw it as a delusion and it loosened the grip. Didn't mean I didn't still have it. It's just got easier for me to manage. It wasn't managing me. The other thing was a practice of being very clear and choiceful about how I wanted to show up. So one is the top half of the profile. Who do I want to be when I grow up? What do I really care about? What's my vision of greatness for showing up in this moment as a consultant? And how am I getting in my own way? Deeply enough that it shifted. And that's the work of any of the dimensions in the top and the bottom half and its relationship to the top half. But this one in particular has been one that I've worked my whole career and it still gets me. I still get in a room with a group of people and I can feel myself tighten. And I'm not at my best when I feel that grip right in here, that constraint. So this is a big deal and it has real implications for teamwork and for scaling because I was unable to scale through those people. They couldn't learn from me until it let go because they could never get it right. And I was always in their face about here's what you need to do differently, more of different. And they couldn't learn. It wasn't until I could sit back and go, okay, it's not going very well. Oh, well, now at the end of the day, let's talk about what happened for you up there. And it became a really generative coaching conversation as opposed to a here's how you got to do it right kind of conversation. Or I would just go up and take over the room, which is really undermining to somebody's sense of credibility in the middle of learning a workshop. So this can really get in our way of transferring expertise, building a team, um, scaling capacity when it's managing me and I'm not managing it. So this one's a big deal, even though it's highly correlated with results or less inversely. It's not correlated positively, but it's less inverse. The other thing about this is when we look at really highly effective leaders who also measure at what we call integral, like post creative level of development, this drops away. So in highly creative leaders, you'll still see a vestige of this. It's diminished, it's middle of the road, but it's there. When you get to highly integral leaders, it falls off because they're getting results through a much higher order system.
We had one quick example here of a perfectionist leader that really got in their way. Is that this is in the, I'll put it generically, in the film industry. Very strong profile in the industry, very strong in studio, and we had a woman got promoted into a executive suite role, incredibly effective, really strong, and just a raging perfectionist. I mean, it had got her all the way. She just would put everything in every day to get it done. And all of what we've talked about here on the downside and the cost to self and others, energetic costs, et cetera, all there, right? All there. But got her into this position. And I'm having a conversation one day, maybe 3 months into the role, with her boss, the president of the studio. And he said, don't think she's going to be able to do the job. And I said, so what's going on? He said, well, she thinks that she can actually do it the same way she's always done it. And it means things like, and this comes back to a conversation you and I had, Bob, at the very beginning of our work together, when you talked about Peter Block saying to you, you have to decide who you're going to disappoint today. She couldn't disappoint anybody ever. She couldn't get to everything that needed to be done in one given day in a very practical way. Her perfectionistic attitude, behavior, the way she showed up, mindset. If she had one email that was unanswered in her email box, she'd stay up till it was done. Well, that translated into never sleeping. I mean, so take it down to real practical. She couldn't literally leave one there. And he said, never going to be able to scale that. It's not going to scale. And oh, by the way, no one else can do it for her. So it's her or not at all. And she has to do it all. The good news is she made that shift. And it's not about being imperfect. It's about understanding what it is that's within our capacity and knowing that it's good enough to go forward. And there's times when it's going to be right there. And there's other times when it's just going to be off a little bit, but wow, is it a great result? And then we get the fulfillment, the satisfaction, and the result, and we could do it at scale. Otherwise, it doesn't happen.
I once had doing a feedback session, a debrief with a woman. And she had a beautiful profile, top half, a lot of relating, not much controlling, but a good perfectionist score, and self score in particular, real high. And I was complimenting her on this profile, and she said, yeah, I used to be really high controlling. I worked really hard at it. I become much more relational. I said, well, congratulations. You've really done an amazing job. And she says, then how come I'm so miserable? And we talked about it, and I pointed to her perfectionist score. I said, so you've gotten perfectly good at relating. And she just went, oh. So there was still this perfectionistic standard. She used it to really learn her way into something, but she hadn't let go of the vice grip that perfectionism. So yes, she was much more effective and equally, if not more miserable than she was before. And
that's big. That's so big. I just flashed on this, and you'll remember this experience, Bob, because I chatted with you just after it. I was also debriefing senior executive out of the pharmaceutical industry, woman who was a twin, and her perfection score literally was at, it was 98%. It was in the top, not just deciles, the top 2%. I mean, right all the way off the chart. And self-score and other score. And when we went underneath it, her twin brother had caused her mother and father all kinds of heartache, all kinds of problems, run in with the law, been in jail. It went on and on and on and on. And as she grew up with that, what she learned is that she was never going to be a problem for anybody. And we sat in that conversation at the end, and right as we were finishing up the conversation, I said to her, I said, so you made the decision that you're never going to cause anyone any kind of a problem. ever, ever, which means you got to do everything perfectly right every time, all the way along. No mistakes, nothing that's a little off. And she said, I just can't ever cause a problem. So hypervigilance around that, it literally kept her in a lane that she could not ever get out of. It held her down in her creativity, held her down in everything she did. And it came right back from, 13, 14 years old. I'm going to go the opposite of my brother so that my parents don't have any of what they have with him, with me. And it was just ruling the entire world at that point. Like, whew. And the minute I opened that up, she just went, okay. And we sat in another 15, 20 minutes of conversation around it's guided everything. It's guided my relationship with my children. It's guided my relationship with my husband. It's guided my relationship with everybody that works with me and for me. And I am so afraid that I might do something wrong or be off or cause a problem for someone else that I hold myself that tight. I'm like, she moved beyond it. She needed to, was
That's
holding
a
her back.
beautiful story. And it,
High cost, high cost. Oh, by the way, perfection is exhausting. It is exhausting. So at a certain point, I know this is true for most perfectionists. At a certain point, it doesn't any longer get us up. It drains us. It becomes exhausting because we never can feel good about what we've done. That's when we have to make that shift.
when you asked earlier why it was included, part of it was what I learned from Clay. He had a dimension on there which he didn't call perfectionist, actually was competence, because that's what he was going for, but he ended up actually measuring perfectionism. And it was the most highly correlated dimension with psychosomatic illnesses on his profile.
Oh, wow.
It's
And
very
even though it was going after confidence, it really gave us a
well.
measure of
That is
perfectionism.
the goal, right? To be supremely competent. And
Yeah.
that's the positive side of it. But if the underlying motivation is perfectionism, then it's self-defeating or limiting and very stressful and therefore causal of illness. And but your story, Bill, gets right at the gift of it. Like
Oh, so true.
if you get underneath something like this that has that what seems like pretty severe cost or self-limitation, underneath that is a gift that's trying to happen. Like this woman, the underlying motive was to be good.
Exactly.
So it wasn't to be a pain in the ass, not the same asshole you used to be, you know, it's a driving for good. And it's also a generative gift. I want to create results. I want to create things and I want to get really good at creating. And in the creative vein, is really good at creating what matters most. That's the generative gift that's in it. But when it's tied up in a reactive structure, it limits that gift. But
I
underneath
so
the
appreciate,
positive
Bob, that you
intent.
brought in. Yeah, I so appreciate that you brought in the gift of perfection because the gift of perfection can be harvested in a way that it gives us huge momentum forward. It gives us all of that for the very reasons that you just raised. And so we have to be really aware that you can't take any one of these reactive tendencies and just deal with it as a problem, as a pathology, as a dot, 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 fill the blank. There's a gift here. And
Yeah.
those gifts are huge. And in perfection, that is absolutely true.
And the other side, the other extension of that gift, Bill, is that when you really evolve into more spiritual stages, like what we call unitive in our model, there is an inherent perfection in reality. You start to open into the perfection of reality or the divine or whatever word you want to put on it. And this person that has a perfectionistic pull in them, there's a tug there. There's a deep knowing of a hidden perfection that lies behind the appearance of things. And so that's like the highest form of the gift is to bring that in, but you can't get there from trying hard to be perfect or else.
Yeah, so we just got our new pope yesterday. Bob and I are talking about that, and for two, our traditional faith was being raised Christian, and I always had this thing of wait a minute, be thee therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh man, what a setup! Seriously, and oh yeah, moving towards that state of being doesn't mean that it's achieved here on this earth in this life. It means it's something that is worthy of us to get perfect, to be better. But that was the one that used to play me all the time like, okay, get that one and figure that one out. You mean I never get to succeed? Oh, no, that's not it at all. That's not it at all. It's worthy of my life's blood to want to be a better human being, to want to be a better friend, a better father, all those things. That's not the same as thinking that perfectionism is the one that's going to actually strike. It's the one that I move towards.
I remember when I got it really clearly, like right down into my gut, I'm going to die an imperfect being.
Ah,
What a relief. What a relief. And so it's perfect in its imperfection.
yeah, Bob. So let's play that. You said to me when that happened, I am perfectly comfortable, know that I will go out imperfect, that I will die an imperfect being.
Right.
I mean, wow, that is a breakthrough for all of us to know that that is the human condition. And what a wonderful thing. Are you kidding me? Think about the grace to know that imperfect is okay.
Antonio Machado has a line in a poem. He says, "He who moves on, even just a little, walks like Jesus on the water. She who moves on, even just a little, walks like Jesus on the water." When we can get in that kind of relationship with our perfectionist side of it,
Beautiful.
it lets go. And then you can step into a much higher level of mastery. That was my story.
Yeah,
And
Bob used his story to help me understand that I had to shift my view of the world. That the story was at a certain point as you get in any position, the chance that you're going to make everybody happy, get everything done, know what that looks like, goes away. It's impossible. It's not there. And that was true for us as we started this business. And we were having a conversation very specifically about this. And I was caught up in trying to make everything okay for a situation that was not going to be. It was not going to be. And Bob said, well, it was Peter Block that told you this, Bob, if I remember correctly. Bob said, well, Peter told me at a similar juncture that you get to this point, you have to decide who you're going to disappoint because you can't do it otherwise. And that's made me very, very choiceful that from a leadership perspective, there are going to be those times that it's impossible for everyone to be okay, everyone to have what they want, or all of that. And trying to do that as a leader, it doesn't work.
the actual content. Peter is such an amazing, he just goes right for the juggler. So I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. I went down to Cincinnati to have lunch with him. He was a big part of my life. And mostly I just wanted to thank him for how much he unleashed in me. And we sat down in this restaurant Bob Anderson. He looks at me, he says, how old are you now? I said, well, I'm 55. He said, oh, then you're at the age where you got to decide who you're going to disappoint. Right. First sentence
Right
out of my
there.
mouth. I'm like, what do you really want to do with? I said, what do you mean, Peter? He says, well, 15 years you're going to be 70. So what do you want to do between now and 70? And who are you going to have to disappoint to be able to really do that?
Whole different friend.
We were 2 minutes in and he had me just rocked.